Καλησπέρα, ονομάζομαι Andreas Pashias, είμαι εικαστικός, performance artist και συνειδητής του οργανισμού epitelesis, Performance Art Foundation και βρισκόμαστε σήμερα μαζί με τον BBB Johannes Deimling, performance artist και επιτελεστή από την Νορβηγία και την Γερμανία. Είμαστε εδώ με αφορμή το φεστιβάλ Videos Performances, το οποίο διεξάγεται από το Beton7. Και είμαστε μαζί με τον Ιωάννης εδώ στην Αθήνα για ένα performance το οποίο έγινε στις 17 Μαΐου με τον τίτλο Herostrat. Θα μιλήσουμε για το performance το συγκεκριμένο, θα μιλήσουμε γενικά για την τέχνη της επιτέλεσης και τον ευχαριστούμε που είναι εδώ. Ιωάννης, thank you very much for being here and I'm going to switch in English. Just for us to understand each other better. So thank you for being here and welcome. How are you?
No, thank you for inviting me here to Athens. I really enjoyed my stay here. Also thanks to Beton7, to the Athens Academy of Fine Arts and as well to the Norwegian Embassy who supported my stay. Thank you for...
It's been good.
The stay?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it, that it was good. But, all the time when you say, when you travel as an artist and then you go to a foreign country or you go somewhere where for other people it might be exotic and people say, oh my God, you go to different places and then they think you are going for a holiday. And I think it was very nice in Athens, but for sure it was also work because we did the performance together, which was a very interesting process. Mm-hmm. And I think since we arrived in Athens, we started the process, which was also kind of work.
Oh, it's a lot of work. And I assume, and now I know, and I knew that doing a group performance is, of course, double or triple the work from doing a performance by yourself, because there are more factors to take in consideration when you're coming up with a piece. The decision process is to be shared, so that might need some more time.
Honestly, I could imagine that we could have 3 days more to go a bit deeper with our research or with our ideas. But in fact, you are totally right, because I think if you develop a performance on your own, I think it's a bit more easier because you are responsible for that, what you do, what you research, how you think, because also you know yourself the best, so it's always difficult when you have another person, which you have to discover how he is working, what kind of temperature he has, what is the quality of work he likes, or in this way. And I think for me, to make a solo performance, which is not existing solo performance, but if I do a performance on my own, I think it's easier to decide and to go through the process than to have another person and to develop things together in a collaboration. Even though I would say that it is more challenging, mm-hmm. So also a bit more interesting, because you'll have to leave a little bit of your own, let me say it like the safe zone.
It's a safety zone, I assume.
And you cannot just go back to things that you have done, mm-hmm. And you think okay, I don't come up with a new idea, so I take these elements, transform them, make a variation. So you have to be always open in a very fresh mm-hmm. way towards that what is coming. So what I think, what also in our performance went very well, was the dialogue we had, because we completely started from scratch. It was nothing that we was relating to. So I would assume that coming here with the plane, was like the starting point. Okay, so now we are starting to work on our performance. And I remember that we bought in the airplane this inflatable airplane.
Aegean airplane, yes.
Which was kind of fun, but also it provoked something like a starting point. So we had this object and we started to talk about. So we had something concrete to discuss. Even now, this toy is lying somewhere in your flat. But anyway, for me, a very important object, because for me, it was a starting point, and probably very metaphorical that it was...
So where to travel to
exactly. Together. So this airplane for me is a very important part of our journey we took.
I mean, sure, it's much more difficult to do this, but at the same time, it's much more rewarding in the end to have shared this and to have gone through all this, some might call it trouble or creative process of coming up with this thing that bears both of our artistic practices together, but at the same time it stands on its own. And looking back at it, I can see that now we have made something that, first of all, we are proud of, and we hope that the people have enjoyed. But at the same time, we can see in our own practices where to go from here, what is new and what can provoke you more. Because as you said, it is a safety zone. When you perform a lot, then you have these ideas, these objects, these images you can always fall back to. But then you need to make things fresh for you in some way. So collaboration can be this nice little thing that pinches you, just to remind you, like, hey, come up, go to a new direction, try this, take a risk, for sure.
I think there's also one level more, because you said like objects, actions, performances you have made. And I think that you have made certain experiences through your own art practice. And as soon you leave this field of your experiences, then you enter a field where you have to make new experiences in order to feel safe or challenged or creative or whatever comes. So the openness towards this process is, for me, a key point in the collaboration with another artist. Also, there's one thing which I found very interesting in our approach, was that we really spoke almost each day, exchanged the idea each day in the daily conversations. When we were on the road, going through the city, buying material, I remember the day when we went to the shop and bought some material just to start with, and it was basically crap material what we have bought. Anyway, but in this dialogue between us, this shopping was very important, because we got to know each other, what kind of material you would buy, what I would buy, where's the taste, where's the personal taste, how can you provoke the other with a material that you completely dislike, or even where you feel like, okay, that's the same material I feel comfortable with. So, and in this process of, so it was not like sitting together, having paper and writing down ideas. It was basically that we went through the all-day life we had here, like...
it's living together, it's coexisting and living together.
Absolutely.
Metaphorically and literally.
Exactly. And this I found as a very big resource, because when you, for example, live together, you share already certain types of feeling or desires, where you then understand, this guy needs in the morning a frappé and a Marlboro, otherwise it's not good.
And but a really good starting point would be the fact that, as I can see it now, we both think in image. So as you have said before, we did not sit down to like write an idea, write a text or make a sketch of what it could be, but we both think in images, and that's interesting at the same time, challenging to share the image that is still building in your head. It's not finalized, and to share that image with the other person so that you can think about it together while it still not exists. So would you like to share some of this imagery from the performance for people who have not seen what we have done?
You mean that what we actually have done, or what we in the process have done?
Both.
So I describe the performance we have made.
Yes, can you?
In a way, difficult because I haven't seen it. I mean, I saw it because we saw yesterday the pictures from Monika, who made the documentation. I think, basically from what you said, working with images, I think it's very difficult in a way to describe the images, because there's one thing probably to start with was on the pictures you could see in the audience a very interesting facial expression. And this facial expression really caught my interest, because I somehow thought it could be possible to tense the visual power of this performance we have made. So we both were kind of sure that it was working, even though we were not so sure. But anyway, we had like this imagination that this image could work in this way. And when you see the documentation from Monika's pictures, you see in the audience this amazing, attentive, touched, moved facial expression in the audience, which is a kind of like a proof that the visual images were really working in that way, that we could speak in a visual language towards that what we have researched. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't create a narrative. Mm-hmm. It was not the performance was about. Mm-hmm. So what we actually did was we were looking for images how we can connect. So I was lying on the floor covered in blue icing sugar, completely, which looked like very deep blue. I remember that Demosthenes said that I was the new Yves Klein because of this blue, which was not Yves Klein blue, but very deep blue. And you was lying in a squared, on a squared sheet, which was wet. And you was lying on it, and you were covered with a very thin white sheet, which made very nice shapes of your body, plus like you created like what we saw in the Acropolis Museum,
a sculpturesque
quality
of the draperies. And what we attempted, it was to disturb the normal narrative somehow of performance, like how it starts, how you come in and see what the expectations of the audience is, especially thinking of this Greek context, like you come in a space, what you expect to see, and from what is to be expected, we would like to disturb that a bit as we try to disturb each other in a very good sense throughout the process of creation. So coming up with this horizontal imagery as a starting point, I think it was successful in attempting to make the audience go, wait a second.
What I think, there were two things which I think for that part was very important, and this was basically that to think during our process, because we went quite far with an idea we had, and suddenly we were thinking that we need to think in a different way. That what can we do, how we can use the space to create something which people absolutely don't expect us to do there. And I think the first image, two bodies lying on the floor, very clear in white and in blue, as a sculpturesque installation, you could say, or a performative installation, I think that was a key point for the following actions. So both for me was working inside of our process where we radically choose another direction. And I think it was like 3 days or something before the performance, or 4 days before the performance, where we completely changed the direction, and I was really happy about, even though we both felt like, oh yeah, now we changed the direction, what now? But seeing also on our performance, I think the first image when you came into this space and you saw this very clear figures, bodies lying there, I think that was a very great opener. So because it went beyond the expectation, audience gathers, the performers arrives in the action space, use objects, use something, and then creates the performance. So already while coming in, we were already prepared.
And how do you think that after our discussions about performance art in Greece and going through this information that in Greece we have a more kind of vague idea of what performance art could be, that is not identified specifically to visual art, but it goes through theater, it goes through dance, it goes through experimental creation that might touch upon performance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it could represent visual performance art. So after having this discussion of this uncertainty in the Greek culture of what performance art could be, how do you think that this specific performance contributed in connecting visuality and connecting the experiential dimension of the visual image with performance art for the Greek audience?
I mean, for me, it is quite new to because I had not really experiences in Greek performance art. But anyway, what I know from, let me say, it is mainly discussed in Europe, or let me say, I would now put it into a context of Europe, is that performance art in nowadays is also differently made and differently perceived, as it has started or historically started in the 60s and 70s. And I think here is one key of that what performance art is doing. It is developing, it is shaping each time anew. For me personally, is that what I do as a performance art practice, what you do as a performance art practice, and also that what we have done in Herostrat, in the performance we showed here, a very clear visual art approach, which means that it's not the action that makes the performance, means that we included very much knowledge of visual arts, meaning color, size, shape, temperature, composition, basically the things you use in painting,
drawing, in all it's
in
what
painting or in sculpture or in these kind of mediums where you use them.
It's what I usually say to people in Greece, like a good performance artist should be good at drawing still life, as a joke. But this is...
It's true. It's true. Because I think that when you go from the visual arts and then you use not the brush, the canvas, the chisel or the hammer or the objects, you use your body as the center of attention, I think that replacement doesn't mean that you have to act like a poet, like a singer, like a dancer, because I'm not trained as a dancer. I'm also not an actor. I'm also not a poet in that way, but I can use that what I know from my visual art approach and combine that with my action. In Marie-Louise Lange, professor from Dresden, she made it very clear that she said the main topic about which we are talking about is not visual or it's not visual performance or life art or performance art. The main category is action art. And I like this term action art very much because that art is in action, which means not theater is in action or dance is in action, but it's clearly said action art. So art which is in action, provoking certain visuals or using exactly art visual languages. But at the same time, what I like in performance art or in this practice of action art is that you are able to involve a lot of other art mediums and art forms from theater, from light, from architecture, from dance, from body, all these kind of things, and you can include them into your art practice, which makes it, on the one hand side, more rich and more advanced, but on the other hand side, it made it very difficult to define that what you do. And that is probably the difficulty when you show your performance to an audience, that they have to detect first that what they see and then to put it into a context. The context for us is clear because we are doing it each day, so it's our work. But for somebody who is coming to a performance art piece, to detect exactly these nuances in action, I think that's the difficulty also for the audience in the moment, because the development of performance art, I think, is very great. It's a very good development, so it's more to go away from that what is the visuals of the 60s and 70s, because that we already have seen, that is already perceived, that is already going somewhere. But young artists or younger artists are trying to shape as well these art form anew, so with their new knowledge and with their new approach.
I guess kind of like the danger in that will be not to be mistaken, and we have this joke between us, just to put some paint on it. It's this joke that when we speak about the visual image, when we speak about all these qualities that you have described that will take us closer to visual performance art, just adding some paint on it does not take us to a solution of what we could perceive as performance art, because there are some aspects, I think, in performance art that could be mistaken as an easiness, that it could be mistaken as an easy tool to speak about something. And by easiness, I mean the fact that performance art can be characterized by a kind of directness, that you are there, I am right there, next to the audience, in front of the audience. So I can speak about what I want to speak directly. And that could be mistaken as an easiness, or this ability to combine the body, the artistic action at the same time as an object or as an action, with some formality, some formal elements that we can find in visual art, such as color, to dress your work, your creation, and refer to it as artistic, refer to it as performative, just by this decoration element. So for me, these are kind of like elements in performance art that could be mistaken as the tools of how to present a work that needs to be performance art, that is honest in its format, in somehow in the somehow creation of the work. How do you think that new, relatively young, performance artists handle these elements? You think that they are aware of these, somehow let's call them dangers of the easiness in creating something that fits within performance art?
Not sure if I got it right, but I think it is... For me, performance art is always in development, and this is for me one of the characteristics. So if performance art would not develop and it would stay on the levels where it is, then I think it would be very boring art form. So how young artists enter this field is for me very important and also very great to observe, because they question certain elements and also certain positions, which I think is very good to keep the question about that what we do alive. So in a way, if we want to speak about a characteristic in performance art, we come always, and this is also a joke between us, it's the time, it's the space, it's the body, blah, 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 blah. What I think is, because I believe that a dancer for example, has a similar moment when he is creating his piece, which means he's also authentic and honest and truthful in that what he is doing. Even an actor, I would call as well honest in that what he is doing, even if it is in the theater or in a film, because the situation is similar, like somebody who is giving a performance. What I like to do, because I'm also teaching performance art, because in teaching, and I go to a high school, you have a certain situation. You have the teacher and you have a couple of pupils, and there is a subject. And this subject, let me call it mathematics, is something that you cannot touch. It's like a mental subject. So this situation, for 45 minutes, they come together and they speak about this mental subject, which they need to explore. So they use language, they use science, they use the blackboard, and in a way that's very close to that what a performance artist is doing while he's doing a performance. I mean, without now directly teaching somebody or delivering a knowledge, but sharing a space where knowledge can evaporate, can get bigger, can be established. And seeing or looking on that thing, I feel that young artists, they shouldn't go directly towards that what is the characteristic. They should approach this field with their own instinct, artistic instinct, because if they would go, wow, it's cool to make a performance because you don't need to, then we have the attitude being in front of an audience, enjoying this moment. So if I'm a bad painter and I cannot draw and I'm a bad photographer, I decide to make performance art, that's the worst case you can do. A friend of mine said once that place the performance artist into a painting class, they are all bad painters. Which means that when you want to be someone who is extending the meaning or the knowledge of performance art, you should use your potential and the quality and the value of creating an artwork. So it's the same like the painter or a sculptor is really putting inside of your work your honesty, your blood, your sweat, your tears, the same process. And performance art, even though it looks sometimes from outside very easy, is not easy to do, because it goes into the direction of an attitude. If you go into the direction of an attitude because it's cool to do, then the performance will
probably not be as good as it could be. No, I think you answered my question perfectly. Thank you very much. So also one other major dimension we had to encounter in Greece is this question of the political act. Performance as a political act, and how direct or indirect it can be. In your lecture in the Athens School of Fine Art, I personally took the time at the end to say my position towards how to go about making political art, saying that you cannot really go about making political art, as there's no such thing as political art, in the sense that when you go directly towards an external condition that might concern politics, an economic situation, a cultural situation, when you feel the pressure to address it, and trust me, I feel now in Greece that we have this pressure, as it's one of the first questions that I get asked when I travel abroad to work, like, how is it working in Greece? Or people expecting to see this working condition within my work. So feeling this pressure, I assume that someone will go about in addressing it directly, in saying that, okay, I have a situation, then I need to address it, I need to show it. So, crisis, I have this label that I'm working with. And what I had said in the lecture was that, for me, it's the opposite, that you have to go first inside somehow, like find your urgencies, your your questions, the things that disturb you, which are bound to be connected with an outside situation. You are living in this social group, so you're bound to be affected. Even if you are the richest person in the world, if we are talking about crisis, you are still affected by what's going around you. So if an artist takes first this dimension of going inside and then towards the outside, if you have this kind of route, then whatever you do, if it's honest towards yourself, if it's direct towards yourself, then it's going to be direct to the situation that's outside. Then it's going to be political, it's going to be economical, it's going to be cultural in that way. So by saying this and then thinking of our performance, Herostrat, and you have also these qualities you have mentioned, like the blue color, the white color, the coins, the flame. There is Europe, there is Greece. There is these elements that could be like an art historian could have a fest in writing about this performance. I mean, they could go about so many directions if they decided to analyze this in a political dimension. And also, some people mentioning the fact that in the end you are German and I am Greek, and it might be an issue of nationality. So we go about in making these images, making these actions, bearing as well the burden of this identity. So how would you say that this political dimension goes within performance art in general? How it is handled? How do you handle it? How does it matter to you, if it matters? And then specifically for this performance, like where do you think that we have some intersections with what is going on right now?
The first thing is that I believe that in performance art, when we speak about one element, which is the time, and it's not, for me, it's the time where things are going to happen. And this is not at 8 o'clock when the performance starts, but it's basically, or it's beyond that, it's the time in which we create our ideas. For example, the performances in the 60s and 70s, they were marked by a very extreme articulation of the body, because the time was very extreme. So the visual the artists choose there were for sure marked by that what the time was offering them, like the change of seeing on conservative things, on how human rights were treated and how political situations in whole Europe were.
Are we talking about the situation of violence, blood, the necessity to
nudity
to carve the body, to penetrate the body in much more violent ways?
Because in that time there were
it was necessary for them.
It was a need, or there was something that the time was telling that there is an articulation in that way. So going back straightly to our performance Herostrat, even though we approached our performance in a very visual way, and here we can just say that this was our approach. We were thinking we get inspired by the statues and by the talking about where we are. As soon we are at a certain context and we are in Greece, I am German. I cannot just ignore that fact doing things. So all that came probably into the direction that for sure, and of course, our performance can be seen as a political statement towards the crisis in Greece, connected with all the elements we have used. So I do believe that our performance had a certain political aspect, and basically when you follow exactly our visuals, you can directly make a very direct link to the actual situation. But beyond that, I have the opinion that everything what you do in a certain context, and if you are aware as an artist about the context, then you are already giving a statement towards a society. Basically, you can say it's a political statement or a social statement towards something that you observe. Because art in nowadays I perceive not only or not anymore as the term of fine arts, as something that is beauty or delivering a certain cultural state of mind, but beyond that, it is probably more a research field in science, in sociology, in anthropology, in politics, where artists are developing more visual skills to give an image about the society where they are living in, or where they are pointing on things within the society which are difficult to use or to articulate. I mean, one of the major examples is for sure Pussy Riot, when we see on that they used for sure music, even though it's punk music, it's music elements, and also poetry to articulate in a very strong way the political problems in Russia, for example. And the same way how we produced our performance or how we created our performance, I think we couldn't avoid that outcome in a political context. So I think even though you work as a visual artist visually, but you work visually in a time, and this time creates this context where you put into your work.
So that would be the sense of relevance, the direction of the relevance. Talking about direction, I would like to ask you, through your work all these years, as an artist, as a performance artist, as a curator, as an educator, where would you like performance art to go to? What direction? And if you could contribute towards that direction, how would you like to see it being formed in the near future through also our most recent actions? Where would you like it to go? And thus, how would you like to see the changes in perception of performance art for the ones who receive it?
I think for me personally, as long performance art has something to give or to share or a value to be articulated, I think that's already enough that I could wish to in the way, I mean, if performance art would be just like a mainstream, where we could say it is probably going to, because performance art right now in 2014 is absolutely booming. It's very popular. You have it everywhere. Performativity is not only a question of art, it's also discussed in education, in science. So the attention of performance art has already reached a certain level when, for example, I have started performance art in the early 90s, and there it was not so well developed like nowadays. So you can go all over the globe and you will find artists practicing performance art, organizing performance art festivals, creating archive exhibitions about performance art. And this is a sign for me that performance art is nothing that has happened in the 60s and 70s, but it's still actually relevant towards the art practice, plus the society research artists are doing. And on the other hand side, I do believe that, or this is my belief out of my educational experiences, is that if people would have an experience without getting an artist or doing that for all the lives, they don't need to do it, but if they would experience performance art as a practice, as something where they can gain a visual or a conceptual experience in the ephemerality of creation, I think that this could help a lot of fields in life to develop, to be seen in a different way, and could emphasize progress in processing modern structures and modern structures and ideas. So if you ask me what could be the vision out of it, as long it is needed, it should be there. And if it's not needed anymore, we shouldn't overdo it. We should probably invent something new or something different, which you can already observe in the art history that it has been done. It came from expanded art, it went to happening, to fluxus. There were already some relevant art forms created in this field of art action. And if performance art nowadays is not relevant anymore, it should simply stop. But on the other hand side, I think we are still at the beginning of a process which will infect not only the arts but also the society much, much more, because the value I saw in the faces of the people looking at performance and getting infected by this art form, they are still very pure, very rich, and very relevant towards art practice today.
So I will keep the fact that you said that we're still at the beginning. I quite like that, and I would want to believe as well that performance art for me still feels fresh. It's still when it's done with this kind of urgency or honesty or necessity that we're talking about, I still feel that it has a lot to give. It feels fresh, it feels current when it's done with these characteristics that we have discussed throughout this interview. So I would like to thank you for being in Athens, for giving me a wonderful collaboration to think about, to reflect upon, to show proudly. And also we want to thank you from Epitelesis Performance Art Foundation, from Beton7 for your presence.
I have also to thank you for inviting me here. I really enjoyed my time here and it was a pleasure to work with you.
So this is not the last that we hear from you.
I hope so not. That would be...
For an Athenian Greek context in general, we wish to have you here again, and it will happen, I'm sure of it.
Would be my pleasure.
Ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ.